pa vendar bi vas radi povabili še, da prisluhnete naslednjemu predavanju našega uglednega gosta. Z nami je gospod Elmar Doppelfeld, ki je za nas pripravil temo z naslovom Evropske vrednote področje zdravja kot primer, pa mi dovolite, da ga na kratko predstavim. Profesor dr. Elmar Doppelfeld je študiral zgodovino, pravo, politične vede in medicino na univerzah v Tübingenu, Münstru in Kölnu. Svoje delo je posvetil področju nuklearne medicine in endokrinologije. Deloval je kot profesor na univerzi v Bonu in gostujoči profesor na univerzi v Zürichu. Sočasno je opravljal vlogo višjega zdravnika na lokalni kliniki za radioterapijo in nuklearno medicino. Je avtor številnih medicinskih objav. Nemška vlada ga je leta 1992 imenovala za člana nemške delegacije pri uglednem usmerjevalnem odboru za bioetiko pri Svetu Evrope, CDBI. Sodeloval je pri izdelavi najpomembnejšega evropskega pravno-etičnega instrumenta z zakonsko močjo, Konvencije o človekovih pravicah v zvezi z biomedicino. Leta 2005 je bil izvoljen za predsednika omenjenega usmerjevalnega odbora za bioetiko. Veliko je prispeval k pripravi dodatnega protokola o biomedicinskih raziskavah. Od leta 2007 je vodil delovno skupino, ki je izdelala smernice komisijam za etično ocenjevanje biomedicinskih raziskav na človeku. Delo je odbor za bioetiko pri Svetu Evrope objavil leta 2011. Profesor Doppelfeld je eden najvidnejših evropskih strokovnjakov za človekove pravice in dostojanstvo človeškega bitja, posebej na področju biologije in medicine. Veliko je prispeval k razvoju evropskih pogledov na bistvene vrednote bioetike. Je urednik več knjig in preko 200 znanstvenih in strokovnih člankov, razprav in poročil sociološkega raziskovalnega področja. Izvolite.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. President of the Academy, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I have to thank Professor Trontel for inviting me to come to this meeting. This is my 5th visit to your lovely country. Normally, health workers or professionals on the health field like to use the word value without having a more or less precise understanding of value. And this has been the same situation for me. And in preparing this presentation, I tried to become a bit better aware of it. And so again, my dear friend, Professor Trontel, brought me to work. So looking for the different terms of values, I found that moral values should be appropriate for the health field. And this is a basis for a decision to prefer one action. One option for an action. For an action is important out of several different other options. And in the health field, we very often have to decide on options, on actions to do or not to do. And in the same way, we are discussing whether there is a hierarchy of moral values. For instance, are there absolute values? And there could be a discussion, is a human being as such an absolute value, or is only the human person an absolute value, as it has been proposed by Immanuel Kant. And the distinction between the two terms playing a very important role is that the human being is accepted and considered as a being from the very first moment of life, that means after conception, whereas the human person is a human being after completion of the birth. It's a very important distinction. And second, are there relative values, for instance, values which could be enter into force in respect or in the framework of an absolute value, and you will hear an example later on. Values are goods which are considered as desirable or worthwhile for the human life. Values are basis of the good as a condition for the human life. And this definition has been given to me by some leading German philosophers like Ludger Honefelder or Ludwig Sieb. Values which are discussed in the health field are, for instance, human dignity, respect for autonomy, self-determination, very important, identity of the person, integrity of the person, privacy, right to information, protection of human life, and, of course, protection of the unborn. Is that a specific value, yes or not? I will come back to these values later on. Concerning the acceptance of values, these values and more are accepted as aims around the world by international organizations, by states. However, the interpretation varies. European values are those which are interpreted in the light of European religions, tradition, history, and understanding of rights. And therefore, personally, I hesitate to speak on European values as leading ideas or proposals for moral actions. And the variation of this interpretation is remarked in Europe as well. For instance, there are different understanding of autonomy in the northern part of Europe and even in some countries. In my country, for instance, human dignity is a bit different interpreted in the northern part of my country as compared to the southern part of my country. So the so clear word value seems to be not so clear and has some limitations in being a leading idea. Of course, values are necessary for the society, and the third point is values are able and should promote the synergy of individual rights and needs of society. I do not use the term equivalence or balance or something like that. For synergy, that means that individual rights and the needs of society should be together and should be in the same place. Ethics is the philosophical discipline which is obliged to see whether principles are followed, yes or not. And ethics are reflection on actions, not on thinking, not on personal positions, but on actions in the light of the criteria good and bad. And again, I learned this definition from the already mentioned philosophers, which are leading philosophers in my country. You know Ludwig Honnefeld. The analysis of an action has to be done in a very rational way. As Professor Carr pointed out, ethics has, following the line of Immanuel Kant, nothing to do with feeling or something like that. It is rational. And there is a catalogue of questions which comes from the medieval time. Who actions, position, qualification, is he able? What does he do? Where does he do? What are the sources? Is he paid? Is he not paid, for instance? What is an influence? Motivation. Why does, for instance, a physician do something? To help a person, to help a diseased person, or to become very famous, him or herself. The methods, are the methods fine? Are they adequate for the action? And of course, the time of the action. And this is derived again, I say it, from the medieval time, and it was, we learned that already at school, that is quis, quid, ubi, quibus auxiliis, cur, quo, modo, quando. This is the English version. And after having done an analysis of an action, which is also, which is done by ethics, as I mentioned, it is a part of an ethics, which is in my country at least called descriptive ethics. You have then to see normative ethics or moral. And good and bad for the assessment of an action is defined by society, professional groups, etc., on the basis of the understanding of the human being in relation to accepted values, based on religion, tradition, history, and other factors. The result of the ethical analysis becomes a recommendation for the moral behavior. And this is very important in the health field, starting with the responsibility of research ethics committees in the last decades, and more with the responsibility of clinical ethics committees. So going to health, what is health? You see a very old definition of health presented already in 1946 by the World Health Organization. This definition is still in use. However, I know that there is a lot of criticism. What is the health field? We can divide the health field in health care with a traditional way, prevention of diseases, diagnosis, treatment, use of stored biological material, and rehabilitation. Medical research is a part of the health field and consists of research on persons, research on stored biological materials and identifiable data, and a very, very important distinction, research with a potential direct benefit for the participant and research without such a potential direct benefit for the participant. What are the values relevant for the health field? These values are accepted around the world. However, as I mentioned already, they are interpreted in different ways. Of course, human dignity, autonomy of the person concerned, beneficence, and justice. And they are derived from the Belmont Report, a report which has been presented to the President of the United States in 1979. What is human dignity? Human dignity has been never defined as a definition, for instance, like in law. But people say human dignity is not, or people can say to human dignity belongs. So, for instance, autonomy is a very important part of human dignity, protection of fundamental rights and freedoms, protection of identity, protection of integrity, and very important, no use of a person as a tool, as an instrument for the benefit of other persons or society, and no degradation of a person. Not using a person as a tool or as an instrument is called in Germany, and this is derived from Immanuel Kant, Instrumentalisierung. So I am not allowed to use a person as an instrument. Autonomy in the field of biomedics, healthcare, and research is the free and informed consent, and the free and informed consent has been introduced for the first time on 29th of December 1900 by a decree of the royal government of Prussia. It could be considered as amazing that free and informed consent is so old, but it comes from Prussia. This means the right to consent or to a medical intervention or to refuse it on the basis of a full and understandable information, and the right to withdraw a given consent at any time. Every person is entitled to say, "Doctor, stop, I do not want that you are ongoing with this treatment." A specific question is, do we need the consent, the individual consent of a person, or do we need, in addition, the consent of a family, or is a family only entitled to give a consent or to refuse something? In some countries, speaking only for adults, of course, in some countries of Europe, it is only the individual consent which is needed, whatever the family says. In other countries of Europe and in the world, the family has a very big influence, and not speaking from Muslim countries or other countries where only families decide whether or not something is done. A specific question is the right of the person to know data collected on the health and the right not to know. In several countries of Europe, physicians think that they are entitled to collect data in the healthcare work and that they are not obliged to inform patients on these collected data. However, on the other side, physicians say we have found something, maybe in routine care, or we have found something during a research project, and we are obliged to tell the person concerned our results, even if the person concerned does not want to know. And the right to know And not to know is a basic right, and in my opinion, is a right which is based on the value informational self-determination. Then protection of persons not able to consent. This is a very big issue, for instance, and this is in most countries regulated in a very different way, and it is the responsibility of the legal representatives according to national law. And in preparing our papers at Strasbourg, we learned, for instance, together that in the UK there is no legal representative. The UK does not know the figure legal representative. Of course, they have other solutions. Beneficence. An intervention should only be done for the direct benefit for the person concerned. However, benefit, what is benefit? It is in a specific situation calculated on the statistic evaluation of the method, on the experience of the physician, and on the actual status of the patient undergoing the treatment. And for instance, one of the values for the physician, who does, is that a physician, for instance, explained to his patient that he is not able and he is not the best physician to do it. That might be there would be another physician who is more experienced. Risk of medical interventions can never be excluded. The proportion of benefit and risk should be in a good relation. And the benefit-risk relation has to be explained to the person undergoing the medical intervention. For this person has to live with the outcome, maybe with a benefit, maybe with a failure. And this explication is required in view of the value human dignity, again. Allocation of goods, this is the fourth part, this is justice. Regulation of access to health care. How? Equal access without reference to the economic situation of a patient. It's regulated in some countries. Reference to the economic situation and to which extent. That means the more somebody is rich, the more he should contribute to the expenses for a treatment. Limitations of access, shortage of resources, cost for the specific intervention. For instance, to say, as we had in Germany decades ago, cardiac surgery is not carried out, it is too expensive. Age of a person concerned, we had in oncology, for instance, that persons older than 75 years had no treatment no chemical treatment in oncology. Clinical situation caused by individual. Would we say to a person, you are a drinker or you are a smoker, you are yourself, your behavior is the reason for the cancer you have or the liver cirrhosis. Value of medical intervention not sufficiently evaluated, and the big question of migrants. Should migrants be excluded from health care? Should they invited? Should they have health care? Yes or not? And prioritization is a solution which is discussed in many countries, but at least in my country there is no prioritization, and I wonder if it is worked. So what about the role of values in the normal health care? Accepted values, protection of life of the human being, including the unborn. Is that an absolute value? Protection of the welfare of the mother, of the parents. Is that a relative value? So to weigh up, society has to decide, and in the European states, societies decided there is a permission of abortion under very different legal provisions. We have in Germany restrictive provisions for the abortion based on the Constitution, and finally based on the philosophy of Immanuel Kant, saying that even the unborn, with the plan to become a person, has the same rights as a person. That means a human being after the completion of birth. So the level of the individual is depending on the personal values of the pregnant women, also the father. In some countries the father has to be asked, some countries not. preference is given to abortion or to preservation of the pregnancy. And so that is to explain the system between absolute values and relative values. Medical research, I start in the value to say enhancement of knowledge. That is research, basic research. Traditionally, people say, first of all, it is for the improvement of healthcare, but the distinction is not realistic. It is an overlap. Again, another value, the protection of the human being as research participant, and specific protection in research projects without a potential direct benefit for the person. Conditions for medical research are more or less the same as conditions for health care, but with some emphasis. Again, participants shall not be used as a tool and shall not undergo any degradation. And it happened, at least in the past. I'm not sure whether it will not happen also today, that older patients or severe ill patients are included. Let me say, are included in a research project without asking them. Then, the informed consent on full information on the research project. Actually, the European Union, for instance, in the way of introducing a new draft regulation for drug research, proposes that under certain conditions, so-called minor research may be carried out without asking the person concerned. Of course, no coercion should be in place, and a specific protection of persons unable to consent and of vulnerable persons. Don't ask me what vulnerable persons are. The term is in the world. No psychiatrist knows what a vulnerable person is. It is my appearance. So we decide beneficence, research with a potential direct benefit for the participant, even for minors, even for patients suffering from dementia. There should be an acceptable relation, expected results and risk to improve the situation, for instance, of a newborn with a severe disease and to include it in research. Research without a potential direct benefit, acceptable risk and burden for the healthy volunteer, for instance. Acceptable, who does define what is acceptable? Of course, in all countries, research ethics committees. Every research project has to present it to a research ethics committee, and in some countries also authorities. And participants unable to consent, only minimal risk and minimal burden is allowed. And this comes from a report from Professor Myers from the Netherlands. Professor Myers was professor of penal law, and he had to give a report to the Queen, to the former Queen. What about research on persons unable to consent? And for instance, research on newborn without a potential direct benefit for the newborn, for instance, looks for the metabolism of certain drugs or something like that. And justice means distribution of risks and benefits, allocation of beneficial results to all participants. And it happens around the world that a specific type of research is carried out, for instance, in India or in other countries, whereas the results are used, for instance, in Germany. And there is a specific type of diabetes which can be screened and which can be object of research, very fine in India. And Indian colleagues come and white researchers. However, the results are not available for the Indian population. The results are only available for the German or for the European population. And fortunately, at least the German Drug Authority does not accept these results. It may be that we are able to stop that. Role of values in research. First question, and which is discussed, research on human embryonic stem cells. Expected results for the improvement of disease, of the treatment of persons. However, embryos are destroyed. And the question is, does an embryo merit the full protection of life as a person, or are a restriction of this protection justified by expected beneficial results for mankind? This has to be discussed. In some countries of Europe, such research on human embryonic stem cells is allowed. In other countries it is prohibited, more or less, for instance in Malta. And Germany has a very, very strange role on this field. It is not allowed in Germany to destroy embryos, to have embryonic stem cells, but researchers are entitled to import these cells from abroad. It is not understandable solution, but it is our legislation. Research on persons unable to consent. The basic question is, can an autonomous decision be substituted? The answer will be yes, it can be substituted by a legal representative in case of a potential direct benefit will be the result, even in research on those persons. However, in research on for research on persons unable to consent, and we found a solution in the Council of Europe. However, this solution, research on persons unable to consent with authorization by a legal representative, is, at least in Germany, criticized by half of the faculties of law. So it is not so clear to say, yes, the legal representatives may say. Research for public health is another question. Values are like a code, but they are understood in a very different way. Research for public health, of course, prevalence of diseases, outcome and evaluation of medical interventions, prevention of diseases, presymptomatic findings with pathogenetic potential. But what about autonomy? Is free and informed consent to be used to use the patient files? This is, for instance, the situation in Germany. Does a public good, such like public health, prevention of diseases or something like this, justify the use of files without consent? I know that in the United Kingdom, the public good, public health, enables and allows that patients' files are used without the free and informed consent of the person concerned. This would be forbidden in Germany and also in France. So you see that a value, free and informed consent and autonomy, may be interpreted in different way in relation to other values. That means research for public health. A very important question is also restricted information on findings. There are, for the benefit of public health, there are population-based studies, for instance, with X-ray screening, and people physicians find something which cannot be interpreted. But it would be very interesting, and I had a long discussion with these researchers in my country, it would be very interesting to see whether this finding, for instance, finding in the lung, could develop to something, also a carcinoma, or will not develop, will stay. And it might be, for instance, that for public health, it could be interesting to say, yes, it develops in the time for 4 years or 5 or 6 years, however. In my opinion, and this opinion is shared by other people, at least the person concerned should be informed, and the person concerned should have the right that this finding is more screened with applicable methods. But the discussion is open. I tried to show you that we are speaking on values, however, that these values are interpreted in a very different way. And this, the Council of Europe tries to bring a European harmonization with regard to the application of biology and medicine to the human being. This is the full title of the Oviedo Convention. And Professor Trontel and I learned that it is more than difficult to find solutions which are accepted in Germany as well as in France or in the United Kingdom. However, we had a lot of papers which have been accepted. For instance, the Oviedo Convention is now a legal instrument in 31 European states. There are protocols, there are recommendations. Work in progress is predictivity and genetic testing. Is it allowed that somebody goes to a lab and to ask, please look on my genome, will I be able to win, for instance, 100 yards running or something like that? Will I die very soon? Something like that. Treatment in end-of-life situations or biobanks. Biobanks. What are the problems? There are problems, of course. The person delivers as a donator tissue to a biobank, and maybe the person does not want that his or her tissue is used for military research or some different. So what about the personal right? And the most important point, and this focuses on the problem of European values, is the continuous discussion, the ethical and legal status of the human embryo. And we are working on this issue, that means the Council of Europe, since 20 years. And there is no light for any kind of solution. It stays like it stays, and that shows you again as a very remarkable point how difficult it is to say European values. Physicians and I myself say we have to use European values are fine, and however, in application, there are many difficulties. So thank you very much for your patience and for your attention.